Hey folks, so this is the monthly internal stakeholder call for the testing group. So today I want to just cover any follow-ups that we might have had from the last time we met, which was late 2019, do a refresh on the roadmap deck, talk through any questions that folks might have there, and anything else that the group has to ask, so general Q&A. So that'll be our agenda today. So I don't believe we have any follow-ups. We had pretty light attendance on the last call. In fact, I don't think we even published it in December because it was just internal folks. And we didn't have any follow-ups in our November meeting as well to address. So we can go ahead and skip over that item, but normally we would, just refresh on anything that had come up or answer any questions, point folks at the issues or whatnot that would resolve those open issues. With that, I'm gonna jump into our roadmap deck. And the link is in the agenda if anyone wants to start thumbing ahead. So hopefully everyone can see the deck there. I see one head nod and a thumbs up, excellent. So the vision for the team hasn't changed any. Our goal long-term is to build out a set of features that within 3 years is gonna allow 90% of our customers to reduce their lead time for changes by 50%. Some of the themes that lead into that include multi-platform support, speedy and reliable pipelines, and doing powerful things easily. And this is all taken off of the CI/CD direction page. So none of this should be too shocking and should reflect what Jason covered in the CI/CD group discussion last week as well. So I'm just going to click through and just present what's coming up next on the roadmap. But if anyone has questions, we can definitely deep dive into these things. But it's just here for you to review. Some of the epics that are in active development include the work that leads up to moving accessibility testing from planned to minimal. Same for our load testing category, moving that from planned to minimal with our load testing MVC. Visual review tools, we're looking to move maturity-wise from a minimal to more of a viable category, and some of the features that we believe go into that and that we're validating through customer interviews are in that epic. A new epic that we're working through initial validation on and we'll be starting work on soon is around finding failures faster, specifically in unit tests. Really the intent there is to reduce that wall clock time between when you start a pipeline and when you can start your peer review. And doing things that bring confidence earlier in the process. So you can start that peer review maybe even before the pipeline is finished, or at least run those tests that are likely to fail as quickly as possible. And anecdotally, we heard the other day from one of the runner developers that they had to wait around 45 minutes before the unit tests that they actually cared about ran in the pipeline. So we think if we can do those within a couple of minutes of that pipeline kicking off, that'll save everybody that wall clock time. And then overall making just our code coverage and code quality capabilities more comprehensive compared to the market and for what customers need. So we'll pause there for just a minute and answer any questions that folks might have or click into those epics. Feel free to jump in there yourself and we can look at any specific issues if anyone has any questions. And we'll cover most of those as we continue to talk through the category roadmaps as we go further into this deck. See a lot of nodding, hopefully of understanding.
So I just found out about the finding failures faster issue fairly recently. Do we have like a even sort of quarterly idea, like when we're planning on working and shipping that? I don't know how long the idea has been around.
I'm going to jump into the epic. I don't think I have everything tied into a release yet. So we're looking at some of the things that make this up that we're still in the process of validating are that running tests for newer modified files first. Beyond that, we want to look at historic unit test insights. And then what I'm hearing anecdotally, but I want to do a deeper dive into through some customer interviews, more official and less like issue talk or discussions off the cuff with folks, is around what we do when we identify a flaky test or when we think something is flaky. What I'm hearing again anecdotally from customers is they don't want us to automatically like quarantine those issues or quarantine those tests. And so while we might create capability to do that, we may not have that be the default on behavior because they want a human to look at it before they do it. But if we can start to pull the data forward, we think that we can help customers run those pipelines faster. So that's some of the work that goes into it, but you can see these 4 aren't slated anywhere yet. And I think that I have work to do to combine this historic unit test insights, which I think I wrote, and then historical view for JUnit XML, which I think Dimitri wrote, into just one issue, because I think we have about 90% overlap in those two that we wrote independently, and now we need to pull together. So this is what I'm anticipating the body of work is to kind of wrap up that opportunity, and think that we can probably do it in 3 milestones or so.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, James, I think we have our own quarantine process from the quality engineering department as well, where we have engineers on call on rotation throughout the week, submitting MRs to quarantine tests so it doesn't dirty up the CI pipeline. That is still very much a manual human interaction. So I agree that we should go ahead and automate it first, but to understand what the workflow is that we need. So I think that's great to see. The other thing I want to add is we have a few issues from the quality engineering department that would love an aggregate historical test view to identify the flaky tests. So it goes hand in hand where you're quarantining it, that's one, but then you need historical data to identify which tests are reliable. And we're working on, I'll add the issues in the document, but we're right now working on a reliable bucket where we promote this test. So all tests are not added to CI until they're proven stable. So there are many buckets where new tests are like quarantined by default with our new process. And if it's run through the CI for a certain week, it's stable, then that test has earned the right to be added to the reliable bucket. And then it's going to be the guard against the release. So that test adds more value as it gets promoted up the chain. So these are a few use cases that we have on our side.
Cool. Yeah, as we dig further into this historical unit test insights or historical view issue, we'd love to chat with your group to talk about what some of the data is that drives those decisions for you, in addition to any external folks who have insights as to what do they look for in their unit test history to identify what might be a flaky test and should be maybe just automatically retried, or what is actually problematic about a test, looking back at like the last 5 runs, 30 runs, 30 days, whatever that time frame, that window is of number of runs or number of days, or time frame rather. That'll be really interesting for us to help drive what that feature looks like.
Yep, that sounds great. One more comment here is that it's not unit tests, because we use the JUnit report for all our tests, including integration and also end-to-end. So I think this is applicable to all tests from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think we lumped it into unit tests, just thinking about like what's closest to the developer. They're probably writing a unit test, but I agree that this is a feature that can extend to integration tests and end tests, really any sort of test. We're just taking it from that lens for now.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. Any other questions on the epics, or should we keep moving along in our deck? Thanks for dropping those issues in the agendas, Mac. All right, let's keep moving along. So some recent features of interest. Unfortunately, a pretty small list for us today, but removing the need for the client-based authorization and visual review tools. We have some follow-up work to do there where we inadvertently broke visual reviews then in turn for some private projects. So we're working on going back and fixing that. But that was one of the things that this feature is one of those that we're working or that we're looking at to help drive adoption of this visual review tools feature. And then lots of great stuff coming up, which I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to. So things that we're looking at for the next 6 or so milestones. The accessibility testing MVC, Drew's working on that currently, which is simply running that report or making that job available to run the report on any pipeline. so that you're consistently testing and looking for those accessibility issues. We've gotten great customer feedback on that one. People are looking forward to it. Again, in the visual review tool theme, ability to take screenshots and include those in your comments in the MR, and then annotating on those comments as well. And then longer term, looking at built-in support for some visual regression testing, which we understand can be pretty powerful, especially for their designer persona, of understanding where things have changed over time as you're starting to make visual changes to the code. So then displaying the screenshot with the JUnit errors is one that the team is working on currently. I think that's a 12.8 item. I've kind of forgotten where that falls, might be 12.9. But that's pulling screenshots out of artifacts and displaying them alongside the error that generated the screenshot. So the internal folks on quality have been a great partner with us on working through iterating on this issue of what it really looks like, the problem that we're trying to solve, and then giving us data as well to help validate that what we're building is going to work and provides value. So Mech, thank you to your folks, Zeph, to you as well. It's been great working with y'all on this issue. And then integrated load testing, that's one that's in problem validation still. We're just wrapping up some interviews with folks and making sure that we're solving the right problem for our persona, the developer persona, in creating or reading those results out of a K6 load test and presenting them back in a way that is actionable and not just noise. We don't want to just present load test results for the sake of presenting them. We want to make sure it's something actionable for whoever's looking at that, that diff between master and what they're looking to change. So as we look at code quality and unit testing, the full code quality report view is in maintainer review right now. So we're looking to release that early in 12.8. Graphing code coverage changes over time. We're solving a engineering manager persona problem there, where today they're exporting that data into Excel or Sheets or some other data format just to look at how code coverage is changing over time for the persona. So we like to joke that we're solving Elliot's problem with this one of our backend managers. Longer term, we're looking at supporting .NET code quality results to extend, really feed into that multi-platform theme that we have going. And then showing code quality on master. Right now, the code quality report is just available, within the context of a change. We want to make that fuller report available always for your master branch or eventually any branch, so that that engineering manager persona can look at what's the full scope of code quality of this project? Where can we make impact on this project, fight against that tech debt, as we continue to make changes? Where can we really have some positive impact against the code base? So as we're looking at this big list of stuff that I've just talked through, what questions pop up to folks about what is here or what isn't here for that matter?
I'm going to be ambitious and ask, can we get JUnit screenshot earlier?
What do you mean by earlier?
Can we have it now? That would help us a lot.
Yeah. We're, it's not in development in 12.8, but the team is already actively looking at it. I know Drew just got a project yesterday or the day before. And as soon as we have it available, we'll pull you folks in for that matter. I'm sure Zeph will want to be looking at it as soon as it's ready to go from an in-review perspective.
Yep, you will have us dogfooding it immediately. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, the feedback from your team has been fantastic on like the design review and just talking through the problem. It really helped us scope that down into something that's going to be impactful versus a really big, unruly thing. Also, it is nice to hear that somebody wants features sooner because they're going to be helpful. It validates that we're building the right things.
Yeah, that one right. Sorry, that one right there, James, is it's a big problem for everybody because there's so many different test frameworks that generate a variety of different reports, and trying to pull all these things together. And if we can have that in a single solution, that's going to be just a huge headache for people solved.
Yeah, we have the latest designs in here in the design tab. And see, we've had a lot of discussion on this issue. to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I think there's twice as much discussion maybe that happened in Slack outside of the issue. I know JJ and I did a couple of design reviews on this, but feel like we're in a really good spot with where the design ended up and the outcome that we're trying to drive for this issue. So the team has started looking at it within 12.9 already, or looking at this issue for 12.9 with the intent to deliver it in that milestone. All right, I'm gonna keep going through. I've provided just a little bit of extra context. I kind of changed up these slides from the format that we had before. It was really just a repeat of what was on the previous slides of what's coming in the next 6 releases. So we believe the accessibility testing MVC is on track for 12.8. And this is just a link back into that epic of what we think is the good set of work to move the category from planned to minimal. And right now we're on track to do that by April of this year. Within code quality, the full code quality report should be out for 12.8. And then we're going to be taking kind of a step back from code quality as we focus on some of the other categories, but believe that up next is going to be expanding coverage for more platforms. And then showing that code quality for branches outside of the context of the MR. That goes back to the, what's my code quality on my overall project, or what's my code quality on my development branch today, so that you can compare branches maybe even outside of that MR context. Within unit testing, we talked through this quite a bit, introducing that graph of code coverage, and then we'll be stepping back a little bit from unit test as well, and starting that validation cycle on the unit test failure happening too late in the pipeline, or really any failure happening too late, and what we can do to pull those failures forward to speed up that feedback loop for developers during a merge request. And load testing, really the only thing to say here is that integrated load testing, minimum viable changes up next. Really that's about integrating results out of those K6 tests for our internal stakeholders, folks on this call, back into the merge request to provide that context. And we're just focused on building a solution that gives really signal, not just noise, so that someone can act on what they're being presented and not just have that another thing that shows up on the merge request page. We're really trying to focus on the data that shows up there being actionable and not just a wall of text, because that can just be distracting to somebody and eventually they start to ignore all of that data. That's not an outcome that we want from this data being presented. System testing, the screenshots with JUnit errors is, it's already kicked off actually since I wrote the slide, and again, hopefully releasing in 12.9. We merged integration testing category back into this category just to cut that number of testing categories down a little bit and keep verify a little slimmer. And then we're starting a validation cycle now in the middle of interviews, really finding problems about testing between projects. We think there's a lot of opportunity there to pull that forward in the cycle and validate that changes that you're making will continue to work, if your microservice rather will continue to work with another project, or your mono repo even is going to continue to work as you're making changes without having to wait to get into a staging environment or even worse into production to realize that something is broken. So we're just trying to nail down really a good problem space that we can focus on there through some interviews with customers. Web performance, we have one little item there to make the widget. Yeah, sorry, it took me a minute to remember what we were talking about. We're making the threshold configurable so that the widget doesn't always display on any degradation to give customers a little bit more control when that web performance widget shows up in the merge request. Again, trying to make sure that data actionable and not just always have it be there and ignored. So when it is something that needs to be acted on is when it shows up, and making that configurable for the customer. And then in usability, really the big hurdle for us on this is just making sure that customers are using the tool. Because of some bugs, we've just had generally lower adoption than we'd like. So we're focusing on fixing some of those bugs, especially around anonymous feedback, and adding that feature back in, or adding the feature automatically into some of the templates that users can, rather people can clone and use, so that they're getting it out of the box and being able to use that visual review tool functionality. If they're using a Pages template or just any of our project templates that you can find on GitLab.com. And I think that's all the categories. It is. So that is the end of the deck. And if anyone has questions, of course, reach out to me, Elliot, or Daniel with any questions that you might have, or hit us up in our testing Slack room. So that was a lot of information really fast. I blazed through those categories. Hopefully people will stop me if I'm going too quick, but no one did. So I assume no questions, or you saved them for the end, and let's talk about what questions you might have.
I have a question. And being newer here, it might not be relevant to this meeting, but one of the things that I was wondering is, you mentioned having in the long term a better place to view, for example, the code quality on master, which is not branch specific. I was kind of wondering what my current onboarding with the testing, one of the things that I noticed is that it's hard to have kind of this overview of what's actually set up in your repo as a whole of testing, like reports or current standard, and it's always in context. But for onboarding or people who are less familiar with the code, then it's a big stepping stone of like, you have to understand where this information will appear for the first time. And I was wondering if we have any plan on the probably longer term to address these as like kind of having a one page or platform where we can see all of that.
Yeah, it's something that JJ and I are looking at, the UX designer for our group, of where do we start to store some of this data. For now, there is a CI/CD charts page, and that's where we're going to put the code quality or code coverage over time. And with that, then we'll be able to get feedback of, is this the right place to put this in context of the overall project? Or should we surface that further up into some of the other dashboards or metrics that are available for a project with those broader test results or code quality or performance even? The other context that I'm talking with some of the folks on the release team about is, as they start to generate release evidence, is there an opportunity to show how those things have changed within the context of a release? And so that would be potentially another place that you could pull that data in, or that we think we can leverage that data, and is really interesting for somebody to say, hey, in this artifact, we've improved web performance, or we've seen an improvement in code quality, or a degradation in code quality. And what does that really mean? And give them that data that's interesting from the perspective of a release. But yeah, it's going back to your original question. We don't know if we have the right spot now, but we're trying to figure out, where do we fit this in? Is it in CI/CD, or is it in something closer to the overall project metrics?
Yeah, I think it's just interesting. It's a good points you're making, because you're trying to see, because you're saying also you want it to be actionable, and if you're doing it on a merge request per basis on merge request, then sometimes it is actionable, but sometimes that threshold could be like more severe on a release basis than it is on the merge. And so I think it's interesting, and I'll definitely want to follow on that subject.
Yeah, you'll probably see in most of the category backlogs an issue that is, create an issue from this widget. So I think I've created that issue for almost every category that we have. So from the report that we generate, can I generate then an issue back into my project to fix this issue? And then longer term, what we want to look at is, can we auto suggest fixes even? Like within the code quality report or the accessibility reports, there's a lot of data that we could probably just pull right back into suggest the fix. And then in talking with the create team, are there ways that we could pull that into the IDE so that even pre-commit and pipeline run, can you start to get that feedback loop even earlier of, hey, this is going to be an accessibility issue. Here's information about how you would fix it. Or this is going to be a code quality issue. Here's information about how to fix it. And improve your quality there even before you commit.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially accessibility. It's the kind of thing where you have to do well, like the first time, you have to do it right. Otherwise, like the cost for a developer is much higher than like if you get it right in the first time, and then you don't have to come back and change everything in your DOM. So yeah.
Yeah, we talk about slow feedback loops in the interviews that we did. Sometimes accessibility testing wasn't done until code was in production, which that is a slow feedback loop. If you have to wait for your build to be out in prod before you can test it, about just the time it would take to get a fix, much less the likelihood that it'll get fixed, is very low or very long, right?
On that topic, What is the collaboration here between the verified testing group and maybe ops or even distribution? Because this group, as I understand, provides the kickoff mechanism for these tests and aggregating the results back. However, to test it, you need an environment set up. If it's unit test, it's pretty easy using a Docker container, run specs. Integration end-to-end, you need to set up, you need to set up your own GitLab stack, like review apps or package and QA, where we're actually going downstream all the way to another project that spins up 5 or 6 containers. So you get a mini cloud, for instance. Is there any line of sight in where that dependency and collaboration with those feature areas can happen in this stakeholder direction?
Are you asking specifically about accessibility?
I'm asking overall, because accessibility, I think we talked with one of the PMs that is leading this effort, and the end of the discussion, we agreed that it's easier to look at the code for accessibility, but there's also other cases where you need to render a full page, then you can run the accessibility, and that you need an environment. So I think there's a dependency there as well, not just running the tool.
Right now, the proposal for the accessibility is to leverage review apps and to scan against that, similar to how we use web performance.
Okay.
Web performance uses the review apps. So it'll be a dependency and they'll be on the same license tier. So you'll need review apps set up, and we'll be very clear about that in the documentation. But that was going to be our fastest way to implement this minimal change that we think will bring value.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
Quick question for you, James, on the finding failures faster efforts. So it appears we're looking at just trying to push the relevant tests up in the stack so those get executed first. And that definitely handles one issue, but a different problem that I know in different organizations I've worked in the past is, they make a change and then it executes all the tests that are absolutely irrelevant, costing them money in CI. Are we kind of addressing that as well, possibly, especially like within GitLab, we value iteration. So we might make many commits to a merge request, and each one of those is going to kick off a pipeline unless we force it not to through the API. So are we looking at that at all in addition to just pushing the relevant tests up?
Yeah, in the POC that Elliot threw together real quick, the idea is that if you're making a change to some code, the unit tests are going to be in a similarly named or same named file, and we just grabbed those via regex, pulled them into a dynamic job or a early job, and ran just those tests first. So we're going to run unit tests against the code that you modified. That's probably not the best long-term solution. So we've been kicking around, like, can we do something like route maps, where you start to map between your files and the tests that need to run, so that we can understand, based on the changes that you're making, what tests are applicable and run those first. Longer term, we think that there's some opportunity around some machine learning to figure out, based on what you're changing, what are the right tests, what are the most likely to fail tests, and pulling those in. So being just a little bit smarter about it based on the history of the tests that you've run, of where you've made changes, things have failed. Start to pull those things, like identify and pull those things forward first. Or when you make a change like this type of test fails, same sort of thing. Well, let's figure out what the right model is to train on, and figure out how much data we're going to need to do that. But we think that longer term, like, that's a good direction to take. So yeah, I definitely, figuring out which test to take, which test to pull forward is the hard problem there. And we have some pretty basic ideas around it, at least initially. And we can see, hey, if you're following, this model of naming things consistently between code and tests, does it help? If we can prove that out, then we have some opportunity to try out those more expensive and more complex solutions, I think.
Very nice. Yeah, that test selection, I was looking at that for our end-to-end tests, and I actually ran across a paper written by Aaron Patterson some time ago on a regression test selection mechanism. And there are actually a couple of engineers over at TopTal that took this idea and formulated it developed a gem out of it. And so they've kind of already have several prediction paths for identifying tests that need to be executed. I'll go put those links to that project in there, so we have some other resources to look at on how we're selecting those things.
That'd be great. Thanks. Yeah, there's Launchable just launched. I saw there's another startup that just got some funding this week that's doing something similar about just smarter detection of which tests should run, or smarter even writing of tests through use of AI and ML. It all sounds a little hand-wavy still, but there is some opportunity there, I think, to leverage the tech. And we're in a unique space where if you're using GitLab for source code or source control and for your CI/CD, we can start to collect a bunch of that data and really tie all of that together to provide a customer leverage and really run an intelligent CI/CD pipeline and run those tests that are likely to fail first and gain the confidence early.
Yeah, that'll be awesome to see completed. Thanks, James.
Mm-hmm. I talked through, but I included in the agenda what we're working on from a problem and a solution validation space. The automated accessibility testing is currently what we're wrapping up solution validation on. And then problem validation is load testing that we talked through a little bit here. And then that find failures quickly or find failures fast is what I'll be jumping into next. So those are where we fall in kind of our opportunity backlog and what we're working on next. So what you'll likely to see in big direction items coming out of the group in the next couple of months as well. Let's see. Any other questions we haven't covered? I don't think I see anything. Meg, did you want to talk through any of the comments that you've dropped into the agenda doc?
Sure. So for load testing, I dropped in 2 big links. The first one is for your solution validation. We're using K6 right now, but it's external from the native GitLab feature. We're using our own CI runners, but we're using K6 as a dependency in the script. Mm-hmm. And the wiki here points to the versions. So let me just share my screen. I'll be fully transparent here. And 1 second. So this is what the enablement quality engineering team is working on right now. And these are, we're dogfooding GitLab wikis. The results are actually posted automatically every time you run a test on the given 10, we're using the 10,000 user reference architecture for this test. So we list all the endpoints that has degraded over time. And that may be one of the results that you want to look at when you pull in K6, because these are drilled down to what endpoint you're hitting. And we also have a CLI, git pull, git push tests that we factor in. So this is one. I'll point you to the project where this is being used. And the way I see it is we want to invert this, where instead of us building scripts hand-rolled, it's just like a GitLab job type, performance job type, and you just specify these endpoints and specify an environment. I highly suggest we start there. I think this is good. This is one. So I will link this to the doc. And the second one I had is load testing also as well. It's being requested by the memory team, and this is where we want to actually move it further. So there are two families of load testing right now. One as a whole against the reference architecture, and that's what our customers are using from the right side of the pipeline, meaning closer to our users. The second point here is from the left, where, hey, how can we drill it down even into more simple form, baked inside the MR itself, and test performance similar to how we're doing accessibility testing right now. So those are the two things that I would drop in as solutions validation. And in the spirit of GitLab, MVC, like break it down. Yeah. What is the smallest thing we can ship to provide value to us and customers, and start there.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yep. And the next one is, I think this is coming in later, so I moved it as a separate item, but we have use cases for getting historical testability. And when you have time to do solution validation, please tag us on it. A number of us are really passionate, and I would love to just shift their attention away from building anything hand-rolled. And hey, the testing group is building this. Let's focus on other parts, squad planning, and then we will just dog food this as soon as it comes in. And it's near to PMs and SID as well. Like we want to be using our features.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for including those.
Yep, my pleasure.
Darby, it's good to see you on the call.
Good to be here. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah. Any other questions? Any other off-topic things people want to talk about while we're all together? If not, I'll give everyone.
This is great. Thank you.
Back. Cool. Yeah, thank you for the engaged conversation today. This was really awesome. I'll get this uploaded to Unfiltered, drop links into the testing Slack, the Verify Slack, if you want to share it. It should be up in an hour or two or so, okay? All right. Thank you, folks. Have a great one.
Thanks, James.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Bye, guys.